So you are looking to get into the RC hobby, you want to go for an RC car. What is the best thing to go for as a beginner? On today's video, we are going to take a look at 5 things to consider before purchasing your very first RC car. Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be taking a look at the 5 things you should consider before purchasing your very first RC as a beginner. Now, I get asked many questions near enough on a daily basis now, such as what is the best thing to go for? Is it nitro, electric or petrol? Ready to run, almost ready to run, or kit? Brush versus brushless? Are Lipos really better than nickel metal hydride batteries? And what is the best size or scale of RC to actually go for? These are just some of the questions that I get asked on a regular basis, which is why I thought I'd put together this 5 things to consider video, so hopefully it can help some of you out there who are looking to buy your very first RC or looking to get into the RC hobby. I'm hoping this video will help you out. Now, if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with all the latest RC content. So the aim of today is to hopefully answer some of these questions. We will be looking at the 5 things I really think you should consider, and hopefully it will help you make your very first purchase. So the first thing we'll look at is electric, petrol or nitro. What is the best power source to go for as a beginner? So let's talk about nitro first of all then, because nitro is very attractive to people who know nothing about RC and are looking to get into RC. If you enjoy engines in general, you enjoy the sound and the feel of a real working engine, nitro RCs are going to be very attractive to you. Now, nitro RCs are absolutely great, don't get me wrong, but for a beginner there is a lot more setup and maintenance involved in actually looking after a nitro RC properly. As soon as you get a nitro RC out the box, there are quite a few procedures you have to do. The first thing is to break the engine in. Now, people have many different ways of doing it. You know, a lot of people actually like to let the car idle for the first tank, wheels off the ground. Second tank, run it around at a slower pace. And third tank, a little bit faster. Fourth tank, full speed, all that sort of stuff. Many people have different ways of doing it. Now, that is something you really have to do to prolong the life of the engine. If you skip that step, that engine is definitely not going to last as long as it probably should. So nitro RCs, such as my CGI one right here, may not be the best option for a beginner. They just require so much maintenance, so many different procedures you have to follow. It can get a bit frustrating and it can get a little bit confusing for people who are brand new. So we're going to rule nitro RC out on this occasion, because I really think you can actually make things a lot easier for yourself if you go for a different power source, which we are going to talk about in a moment. Now, if you have the budget as a beginner to go for something like this, fair play to you, because I certainly didn't when I first started out in the RC hobby. But would something like this be suited to you? Again, I am not entirely sure. Now, one of the things I noticed years ago when I ran 5th scale petrols was the fact that they are a little bit easier to use than nitro engines. They don't require a glow igniter, for example. They are a little bit easier to start, I always found. They are a little bit easier to tune as well. Overall, just a little bit more of an easier experience. The engine's a bit bigger, easier to work on, but they are incredibly expensive, and there are some better options available to you. Now, the one thing I would say, if you're considering something such as this as your very first RC, please consider where you are going to be running it. These things are absolutely huge. They're also really heavy and they can be really loud as well. Now, I used to run a Dominator pipe on my HPI Baja 5B, and that thing was incredibly loud. I think I actually have a clip of it, which I'll stick on the screen now. Now, that thing was incredibly loud, and that really used to upset the people in my local park where I used to run it. So would a big 5th scale petrol such as this be a good option for you? I really don't think so. I think they are far too expensive. They're also really big and they can potentially be really loud as well. So we are going to move on to the third and final power source, which I think is going to be the best option for you. Now, if you haven't already guessed, yes, I am talking about electric RCs. Now, I really do think electric RCs have come really far in recent years. When we consider how much cheaper brushless systems are and lipos in general, getting decent speeds out of some very budget friendly RCs is definitely doable these days, and certainly on a tight budget or a limited budget. Not only that, but if you are running a brushless system in your brand new RC, or if it comes ready to run with a brushless system and lithium polymer batteries, you will definitely be able to push some serious speeds, which will almost always be quicker than their Nitro or Petrol counterparts. Now, there are a huge amount of very good, cheap, ready to run electric RCs these days, which makes them a perfect choice for someone looking at getting into RC. It really does seem like the most easiest and painless option. Okay, so we have considered our options and we have established that the best thing to go for is more than likely going to be an electric RC as your very first RC. Now, this brings us on to the next thing, which is, do you go for a kit? Do you go for an almost ready to run, or do you go for a ready to run? So if you are considering a kit as your very first RC, this is not always a bad decision, because building a kit can really help. Should you need to fix or do maintenance tasks on your RC, you will know exactly how to take things apart, what goes where, and how to put it back together again. Now, there are of course some considerations when it comes to building an RC kit. You will have to supply your own transmitter, receiver, ESC motor, servo, batteries, charger, plus a lot more as well. You do have to bear that in mind, which is why again we ask ourselves the same question: is this the most viable option for a beginner? Potentially not. Now, if you have built kits in the past, or if you've built anything similar, you may actually get on alright with the kit, but I think there is another easier option. Now, picking out all these components may not be the easiest thing to do for someone who knows very little about RC, which is why we're going to move on to an even easier option in a moment. But there is one other thing we need to talk about, and that is almost ready to run. Now, with an almost ready to run, essentially what you're getting is a rolling chassis. Now, very similar to building a kit, you will have to provide your own electronics again. So like I mentioned, your transmitter, receiver, ESC motor, all the other bits as well, servo. You will have to provide all your own electronics again, but the only benefit to buying an almost ready to run or a rolling chassis is the fact that it is pretty much pre-built. All you need to do is throw your choice of electronics in there and off you go. But guys, do you know what? I think there's an even easier option for someone looking to get into this sort of thing, and that is to buy a ready to run package, for example, which will come with everything you need included in the box. Now, you really can't beat a good ready to run RC, especially if you're new to this hobby. A ready to run will come with everything you need in the box. It's almost always a simple case of charging up the included battery and putting some AAs in the transmitter. Now, it's a worry-free and painless option for anybody who's brand new to RC. I really think this is the best option for you. Now, ready to run packages are the best option because they do include everything like I mentioned. Now, in my years of buying ready to run RCs, I have noticed a lot of the time the batteries and chargers that they actually include in the box aren't always great. The batteries are usually of low capacity, and 9 times out of 10 they will include a trickle charger as well, which takes hours to charge even a low capacity battery. Now, that said, this really is the easiest option as there's very little to go wrong. But you will more than likely want to upgrade quite early on the battery and charger. That's just my opinion. There are a lot of ready to run RCs out there now that have actually started to include higher capacity batteries along with better chargers, but it's definitely something to think about before making your purchase. So we have established that an electric ready to run is more than likely going to be your best option. So what comes next? Now, the third thing to consider when buying your very first RC car is, do you go for a brushless model or do you go for a brushed model? Now, this really does come down to budget and how much you're willing to spend. Brushed motors have been around for many years in RC. Years ago, if you went for an electric model, it would almost always be brushed. We have to remember that brushless is still a relatively new power source in RC, and in recent years has only really started to become more affordable to most people. Now, brushless power systems and lipos, along with chargers, used to be insanely expensive, but as technology has improved, things have become more affordable. I definitely think brushless is starting to take over in the RC world. Now, no longer do you have to spend hundreds on a brushless system. Basic brushless systems can actually be had for well under $100 these days, which makes it a very viable option. Now, brushless systems do tend to be more efficient. You can expect to see longer run times. Faster speeds are also achievable. and also they tend to be maintenance free. There's no brushes to worry about wearing out, such as what you get on a brushed motor, and there's much more as well, but we won't go into too much detail because I don't want to confuse you too much. But yeah, now if you do decide you want to go for a brushless ready to run, to really get the best performance out your model, you do need to consider your battery choice. Now lipos will definitely be the best way to go if you're looking to get the best performance out of your brand new brushless RC. If brushless is far too expensive, then let's not disregard brushed RCs. Brushed RCs are incredibly good value for money, making them an ideal choice for beginners. And not only that, if you crave some more speed or performance later on, you can always do a brushless conversion, which is something I really enjoy doing myself, and it's an excellent way to actually start out in this hobby. Now let's take a look at the fourth thing to consider when purchasing your first RC. Do you go for a nickel metal hydride battery or a lithium polymer battery? Now nickel metal hydride batteries are easier to use, they've been around for years. Not only that, they must be fully discharged before charging, and must be charged full before storing. Now Lipo batteries don't have to be fully discharged, and ideally they must be stored with a 50 to 70% charge level. The charging must be done with a charger with a balanced charging option. This is always, I find this is always the best and safest way to actually charge a Lipo, is to use the balance option on your charger. Now it is always good to store your Lipos safely. Now you can use a Lipo safe bag, or you can use a metal tin or a metal case. Anything like that will definitely be the best way to look after or to store your Lipo batteries. Because we do have to bear in mind they can be volatile and they are extremely flammable. Now you have probably seen or heard so many horror stories about Lipos and Lipos catching fire. Now this is definitely something that can happen. Almost always it's because of incorrect charging, or the Lipo actually gets punctured in a big crash or an impact, or even potentially, I've had it in the past, where an ESC can cause a short, which can cause the Lipo to basically catch fire as well. But I wouldn't worry too much because it is very rare. As long as these things are looked after carefully and you do take the right precautions with storing them and looking after them, Lipo batteries are extremely safe. Now another thing to bear in mind, if you do decide to go for a ready to run RC that features a nickel metal hydride battery, you will more than likely be able to upgrade to a Lipo battery at a later date. A lot of ESCs that come with ready to run cars actually feature different options, and they will allow you to select the option to run a Lipo pack instead of the nickel metal hydride option, which will definitely give you some more performance. Now this brings us on to our fifth and final consideration when purchasing your very first RC. And the final thing we're going to talk about is scale and what size of RC to actually go for as an absolute beginner. So scale simply means the size of the vehicle in comparison to its full-size counterpart. So let's use this Armour Typhon for example. This is a 1/8 scale buggy, so this would be 1/8 for the size of its real full-size counterpart. Now this is great, but what is the best scale to go for as a beginner? Well, to be honest, there's no real answer to that question. It really does come down to a few things, such as budget, the surface you'll be running on, which RC you actually prefer the look of. There's many different types out there, such as short course trucks, monster trucks, buggies, truggies. There's so many different types out there. It really does come down to personal choice. Also, another big consideration is the size of the area that you're intending to actually run your RC. If you are pretty much running in your backyard or your back garden, then you're going to want to consider something a little bit smaller. If size really doesn't matter to you and you have a huge amount of space to play with, then you can consider pretty much any RC you want. You know, even the big Petrols, all the way down to the micro stuff, you really won't be limited. So there are many factors involved in picking out what size RC to actually go for. It's not something I can give you a definitive answer to. This one really will depend on you, what takes your fancy, and your budget as well. Also where you're looking to actually run your brand new RC. So there you go then, that is the 5 things to consider when purchasing your very first RC. Now I really hope this has helped you clear up some of those questions today. It can be a little bit confusing when you're just starting out in this hobby, so I'm hoping we have actually helped you out today. Now in my opinion, you really can't go wrong with an electric ready to run. It will provide you with the ease you're looking for in your very first RC model. So if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to hit that subscribe button, like this video as well, and also leave a comment down below. Why don't you let me know what your very first RC was, how many years ago it was, and how you actually got into the RC hobby. please let me know down below, because I'm very interested to actually hear how each of you have actually got into the RC hobby. We all have our different stories, so it'll be very interesting to actually read some of yours. Cheers guys, and I will see you again on the next video. Take care.